Welcome, Jonathan. Thanks so much for coming. It's brilliant that you did, and great to meet you. And I was wondering, I'm fascinated about HACERA. Have I pronounced that correctly?
Yes, that is
Great.
correct. HACERA, yes.
If you could tell me a little bit about what led you to create that, what it does, and what problem it solves.
Okay, so first of all, thanks for letting us bring us here. HACERA is a company that basically builds a framework on top of blockchains. So what led me to it was that people are working on different blockchains. It was the Bitcoin blockchain and then the Ethereum blockchain, and then later on we started realizing that people try to put data on top of a blockchain, and they had a lot of regulatory constraints in terms of privacy, who can see what, who can do what, who can access a network, who can join a network, how can you revoke somebody's rights if they misbehave. And the problem was that there are so many different blockchains, and we said, okay, why don't we sit on top of it? And then we're going to build a framework that can work with different blockchains.
Wow.
So when you build an application, you work with one API or a set of rules, and then you can always change how you want to deploy your application. Yeah.
Wow, that's fantastic. And so in a way, you're bringing people together.
Bringing people together, bringing devices together, working with organizations from different locations, jurisdictions, geographical kind of rules. If you're looking at supply chain, you have boats and ships and sensors, and try to get everything connected with a lot of data and a lot of regulatory constraints. It's not that easy. So we were thinking, how can we help in terms of using a lot of crypto, a lot of the new technology, but try to make it very easy for people to collaborate.
Wow, that's so cool. And can you tell me, do you have a story about what led you to be passionate about this area?
Yes, I have a long story, but I'll keep it short.
Yeah, please.
So I'm actually an applied cryptographer. I've done computer science for many years. I'm an applied mathematician. So I spent something like 10 years doing crypto, and then another 10 years almost doing finance. I was in the City of London, Barclays Capital, Standard & Poor's, Goldman Sachs. And at some point I realized, look, we can combine that. Like, we do a lot of nice stuff in finance, but we need to open up to the world. So how can we combine crypto and finance? It's kind of crypto finance. So 2012, I left Goldman Sachs to open something that sits on top of the Bitcoin stack. And then we realized that there are so many regulatory requirements. And then we had a lot of iterations. But what now is my passion is to try to see stuff that is using real data, real users, real use cases, instead of just us just looking at the blockchain as the next big thing, but to really try to work out all the stuff that people need in terms of, if you want to do finance, if you are in healthcare, if you're looking at supply chain management, IoTs, there are so many challenges that are nice technically, but it's really nice to see it from the business side. So the passion is kind of to work with the business, understand what they need, and try to bring kind of the cool technology there to the use cases.
So again, connecting people and things, that's fantastic. It's obviously your mission.
It's a long one, right? It will take some time. So we started working with a lot of open source projects. So we worked on a Bitcoin stack back in the day, before Ethereum was even launched. And then when Ethereum came up, we started working with Ethereum. Actually, I helped to create the first Ethereum kind of project at Stanford when I worked with Dan Bonet on building a class, teaching students how to use Ethereum when it just started. Now we work with Hyperledger Fabric. I'm one of the early contributors. I was working at some point for IBM Research, working on membership services and who can access what and how do we look at permissioning in a way that is easy for people to use. And then contributed more and more to the Hyperledger Fabric, became a maintainer and nominated. Today, actually like a few months ago, I was the official release manager of Hyperledger Fabric. And now sitting on the TSC, on the Technical Steering Committee of Hyperledger, just by contributing code. We didn't sponsor anything, we didn't pay for anything. We just came in and said, hey, can we help with this? And just took some stuff and worked with a lot of organizations. I think we delivered it with 27 or 28 organizations, all combining forces to have a nice layer that is all open source, everybody can take it and bring it to production. So it's really exciting.
Very creative too, right?
Yes.
You're creators,
Yes.
right? So in the enviable position you are in now, but obviously because you were there at the start, where do you think it's all going to go? Like, what's our future looking like as far as the blockchain goes and cryptocurrency?
Okay, so it's very interesting because if you're looking at 3 years ago, it's like we didn't have much. We had some Bitcoin, and everybody that talked about Bitcoin, people think that he needs to sit in a mental asylum.
They were weird.
Yeah, it was like, what do you mean Bitcoin? Come on, you're a Goldman Sachs guy. Why are you even, don't you? Yeah. So there's a big shift now.
Yeah.
Now, if you're not using blockchain, people think that something is wrong with you, right? So I think the future is going to be to really try to harness this technology but in a way that will enable more businesses. At the moment, people are still investing in blockchain, mostly because either they're afraid, or they don't want to miss out, or they're trying to do something, but it's very difficult for them to really move the technology in the right direction. So we see kind of people pushing in different forces and pulling in different directions. I think the future is going to be when we are going to have a lot of trusted execution environments where I'm going to have, just like today, nobody is thinking of hosting their own web server. You know, you go and you host it somewhere else. I think the blockchain is going to be an infrastructure on top of which we will have to be able to do a lot of stuff in terms of like trust, connecting, voting, anything that you need auditing that is going to be in the public. But what we're going to see in the terms of like the logic itself, the smart contracts, I think are actually going to be simpler and simpler, and the logic is going to be a lot more clear. So if I want to buy an option or a stock or anything that is conditional that has some logic, I would like to be able to know what I'm buying into. And instead of me trusting someone because we had a PDF that we exchange via email, and then if they misbehave, I go to my lawyer, I'll be able to actually buy into that contract knowing what it's going to do and trust the environment when it's running on. And then it's going to be very clear for everybody in terms of transparency. And I think we're going to have less friction going forward. So the future is going to be a lot more frictionless. I think the future is going to be a lot more fast, and we'll have a lot more auditing. So maybe as a side note, people are so worried about regulations, and I always argue that your best friend in an enterprise, in financial environment, is actually your compliance department, because they are the ones that will help you launch stuff and go to production while meeting all the rules. So I think if you think about people are worried about, oh, the IRS is going to see all my transactions, it's actually not a bad thing. Like, we can use the blockchain now to show the regulations everywhere, like, every regulator. It doesn't matter if it's Europe, China, especially in the US. It's kind of the regulators' kind of best dream to have everything auditable, everything in the public, and then to understand what's going on. So I think we're going to be working in a lot more transparent environment. Things are going to move faster. We're going to have a lot more connectivity. And what we're going to see is less friction in terms of like payment, value transfer, and any data exchange is going to be a lot more permissioned. It's not going to be just people tweeting stuff and it's going to be uncontrollable. It's going to be more, if I said something, people will be able to hold me liable for it. So A, I will have to be careful about what I'm saying. B, I should be able to use the fact that I just made a public statement and later on relate to it.
It's almost as if it will protect us from ourselves, get out of our own road in a way, because we often cause problems for ourselves by not thinking, or, you know, some people being abusive, or some people misleading others. So it's sort of going to protect us from all of that, right?
Yeah, and it does get back to you. So it's, you know, people say stuff online and then 5 years later, oh my God, you said that at the time, and then there was a tweet here and there. So one thing that is interesting about smart contracts is actually it does force you to change your business process. So it's not just now we have the mobile application, but now if I need to kind of think about today when I'm trying to order a taxi, I already have a set of kind of consumers and a set of producers in a market, right? When we have a network that try to make ends meet. So it's going to be a similar thing. I'm going to produce some data that is going to be both a liability and an asset, right? So we have to be careful about how we publish information, because yes, it is sensitive, but at the same time, we should be able to use the fact that I did something at a specific time that I can prove that this was my quote or my request or my approval. So all this process needs to come actually from the business process itself. And then you use the blockchain and the smart contract just to apply the logic and to implement it in a way that does make sense to you.
Fantastic. Look, it's so great to have you here. I'm really looking forward to this panel. Thank you.
Likewise. Thank you.